Welcome, everyone, to NRL's weekly webcast. This week, we're focusing on narrative reporting and specifically what's new in narrative reporting this year. I will be covering notable new features and enhancements released since January 2020. My name is Opal Alapat, and I'm a practice director here at NRL Consulting. I'm also an Oracle ACE director, and one of my passions is reporting. As you can see, I've been certified in narrative reporting, and I am the author of the one and only book on narrative reporting in the world. So what we're going to do is let's hold questions until the end, and I promise you we're going to have plenty of time. And note that if you have any questions after this session, you're welcome to email us at info@nrl.com, and they will route your question to the appropriate expert. First, to level set us all, let's talk about Oracle's reporting landscape. We often find that our customers have a wide variety of reporting needs. This slide is what I like to call the Swiss Army knife of the types of reporting that our customers do on a regular basis. To start in the top left corner, let's go around and discuss what each of these means. So in the top left, we have static reporting. This is usually a report that someone develops for the enterprise and is not changeable by end users. So this could be something like a balance sheet, a cash flow, an income statement. Then we have drill reporting, and drill is in quotes here because it could mean different things depending on which technology you're talking about. So drill reporting could be drilling into the transactional layer of detail, or maybe drilling into another report with additional detail. Then we have the business practice of narrative reporting, which is combining your text with your grids and your charts in order to tell the entire story of the organization, usually its financial status. This is usually in the form of something like an annual report, even a board report. There's different options here. Then we have ad hoc reporting, which is the ability to explore your data and slice and dice it or drill into more detail. We have dashboards, which is more of a visual way to represent your data. It's usually an aggregated format, and we often see dashboards created for the C-level suite, although I have been at customers where they've created pretty robust dashboards for the entire organization. Next, we have statutory reporting, and this is basically street reporting. It also could include regulatory filing. And then finally, we have data visualization, which I'm going to say is a little bit different than dashboards. They could include the same components, and there's overlapping there, but data visualization in this case would be being able to explore your data, but through a visual way. So ad hoc, but through charts. And if you look at how the Oracle stack provides solutions for each of these reporting needs, you can see that there's an Oracle tool for every type of reporting, namely the EPM and analytics sides of the house. Note in particular that the solutions that I've highlighted in green font are within the narrative reporting umbrella, which means that all EPM reporting in some way, shape, or form can be answered by the narrative reporting suite of tools. Now let's shift gears to what exactly is narrative reporting. And some of you may not be familiar with this awesome reporting tool, so I am going to just spend a couple of minutes talking about the capabilities and what comes with this particular suite. Narrative reporting is a cloud-only solution that offers a secure, collaborative, and process-driven approach for defining, authoring, reviewing, and signing off report packages. It also provides a robust solution for static reporting, statutory reporting, and regulatory filing. The reason why narrative reporting is so important is that it's Oracle's strategic EPM reporting technology. It comes with so many reporting solutions that I often like to refer to it as EPM reporting on steroids. Some of you may have heard by now, but our beloved financial reporting tool, also known as FR, is being sunset. One of the solutions within narrative reporting will be the replacement solution, and we'll talk about that in a second. So what comes with narrative reporting? The first thing to know is that narrative reporting is a suite of solutions. No matter what licensing you're on, it comes with the tool with the same name, which is called narrative reporting. as well as management reporting and a data storage container. The data storage container allows for custom usage and legacy licensing and offers a sample data source in the new licensing tiers. Disclosure management was a separately costed add-on and legacy licensing, and in the new licensing tiers, it comes with the enterprise level. Now let's go through each one of the tools that comes within the suite. So the tool with the same name, which can sometimes be confusing, also called narrative reporting, has a main object called report packages. This tool has complete workflow, and it's flexible to allow any data source that can get into Excel. So this would include on-prem and cloud EPM data sources, analytics data sources, and even third-party data sources that you can bring into Excel. So for instance, if you have a third-party add-in that brings data in from a relational data source or even your ERP, as long as you can get it into Excel, you can get it into the narrative reporting tool. Now, customers often use this particular tool to create board packages and/or annual reports. Those are the two biggest use cases I've seen. If we shift over, the management reporting tool has an object called reports. This technology will fully replace FR. We don't know exactly when, but my guess is in about 3 years. If you have FR today and you plan to own narrative reporting, don't panic. There is a direct migration path from FR to management reporting. For most customers and reports, this is pretty painless, and you can migrate dozens of reports over and correct any issues, as management reporting actually requires a higher design integrity, so there's often issues that are discovered, and you can usually migrate your reports with just a couple of hours. I've sat in multiple workshops with customers where we've migrated anywhere from 25 to 100 reports and got the whole thing done in a couple of hours. You can think of the data storage container as a sample data set. It's there so you can get started playing with the different reporting technologies. And what you should know is that, again, for legacy licensing, there was the ability to do a custom data storage container. In the new licensing, regardless if you're in standard or enterprise, this has now been shifted over to a kind of ghost sample data set. So you can just start working with something with your reports and not have to wait to access a different data source. And then finally, the fourth tool within the suite is called disclosure management. And it is mostly used on the consolidations and close side. This tool, which comes with the enterprise licensing tier in today's licensing world, is used for statutory reporting. It supports XBRL, regulatory filing, and it includes multiple SmartView extensions and even a taxonomy designer. So it's its own beast, to be perfectly honest. So now let's move on to the updates, and note that the goal here is not to cover every single update in detail. We're just going to cover the notable ones, and I will show some demos and screenshots of the ones that make the most sense. So here's a quick summary of what I consider the notable updates so far as of January of this year. And this actually covers all the way through the next release, which is October, which rolls out to test pods this Friday. So if we go through this list, what you'll see is there are enhancements, new features, and even upgrades. So let's walk through it. The first enhancement, and this is actually in chronological order from earlier to the most recent, is books can now be embedded into other business processes like reports can today. So one of the cool features is if you have the EPM cloud stack, you can actually embed business processes within other business processes, so your users don't have to log into 5,000 places. You could have, for instance, within your planning pod or your FCC pod, you could have a card that has embedded reports and now books from narrative reporting. So your users only have to go to one single place and they don't have to log into both technologies. In addition, we have a brand new feature called groupings. And what this is this exists in the reports tool, which is management reporting. And this is a parity gap feature. So it provides parity with the auto calculation feature that used to exist in FR and actually still exists today. Then we have an enhancement, which is analytics on a conditional text feature. I will cover that in more detail because some of you may have no idea what I'm talking about when I say conditional text. We have another enhancement. This is on the disclosure management side, which is auto tagging is now possible for XBRL. We have another brand new feature, which is in management reporting, and it is bursting. And note that this is also a parity gap filler between FR and management reporting. So the bursting feature, I'll talk more about it in detail, but there is now that availability within management reporting. We have an enhancement. This actually occurred multiple times this year, so it's always important to make sure that your users have the latest SmartView extensions downloaded, but all of the narrative reporting SmartView extensions, I believe there's something like 3 of them, have been updated multiple times this year. And I believe even in the October update, again, releasing to the test environments on Friday, they've been updated again. So always make sure that you have the latest. We also have a big upgrade in the Oracle's quest to make everything consistent across the EPM Cloud platform. They are now extending EPM Automate functions to administer parts of narrative reporting. I'll cover that in a lot more detail in an upcoming slide. We also have several enhancements on the integration between management reporting, which is the reports tool, and Excel/SmartView. So now there are a lot more options. I'll actually cover all 3 options that are possible, 2 of which are brand new. And then we also have a brand new feature, and this is a brand new feature to static reporting tools in general, which is you can now use user variables and reference those within your reports in management reporting. That's pretty exciting because that feature did not exist in FR. So this is a really cool thing that they've extended to this platform. All right, so let's cover the notable ones here in high level detail. So the first new feature to discuss is groupings. And for those of you who came from the FR world, groupings provides parity with the sum auto calculations feature in FR. It allows you to group your data components easily without massive design work, which can take some time to build. So let's watch the demo of how this is actually built. So I have a management reporting report. As you can see, I don't have grouping set up, but notice that I have some stacked rows here where I have a segments dimension and entities dimension. And if I don't use groupings, this is what that would look like, assuming that I'm using the repeat headers feature. And there's nothing wrong with this, by the way. You could use, formatting to kind of highlight all the different sections. So now let's add in groupings. And what that means is you kind of have to highlight the row that you want to add groupings on, and then you can start to add the groupings in to your stacked rows. So in this particular case, I now have groupings on segments. But that's not all you have to do. There are actually several steps here. You have to add in quite a bit of formatting to make sure that you can easily see the differences between the segments. Like for instance, I wanted the children of the segments to be grouped, and then I wanted a total grouping for all segments. So I had to add in a little bit of special formatting required for this feature. And notice that I have a header section called member alias segments, which now allows me to put a nice little section header on each one of my segment groupings and even add formatting to them. So this is what is possible after you both add in your groupings and you also add in the necessary formatting if you want it to look nice like this. Next, let's talk about the analytics enhancement to conditional text. But before we do, some of you may be wondering, what in the world is conditional text and why is this important? And the reason why I bring this up is because conditional text is something that only exists in the management reporting platform. This did not exist in FR. So the way to think of conditional text is like conditional formatting, but with narrative instead, or commentary. So you can cater the narrative based on some condition in your report. For instance, I have this data range, and if I encounter it, I want it to say this particular comment somewhere on my report. So the way that you set up conditional text is you go to the conditional properties that exist for management reporting. These exist in suppression format, conditional formatting, and now conditional text as well. Then you're going to determine what the conditions are, right? So this particular cell, if it's this data range, I want you to flag as this condition. And then you're going to set up a text object on your report where you now capture that conditional text. So you need a combination of two features. You first have to set up the conditional text, then you have to set up a text object to capture that conditional text. And then finally, in that text object, you have to use a particular function called conditional text. And then what will happen is when a user runs the report, if any of those conditional text conditions are met, then it will spit out narrative/text in your text box once you've set this up correctly. So what I would say here is if you weren't familiar with conditional text itself is not new. What I'm covering right now has been in the product for a while. However, what is new is that Oracle has extended this feature to allow for supporting analytics behind the text, which is part of the new kind of AI, machine learning, the cool direction that Oracle's going with the entire EPM Cloud platform. And the reason why this is important is because what will happen is if you decide to select analytics, which is basically a text box that you choose to be either on or off, anything that is conditional text will become a hyperlink, which means that the user can click on it and it will take them to a supporting report that Oracle creates on the fly that gives additional detail behind that condition. Now, because this is an interactive option here, that means that your users have to be in HTML mode. This would not work in PDF mode. So let's take a look here. Here is a demo. And in order to kind of set up what's happening here, I have a management reporting report. Notice that I have a grid here. And I also have a a notes box. No, actually, that's a text box. Sorry, that's a text box, which has the conditional text function in it. So when a condition is met, what will happen is it will be captured here within this text box, so on the right side of the screen. And then because I'm going to have analytics checked, you'll see that they'll turn into little hyperlinks. So let's go ahead and play that demo so you can see how this works. So I have that set up. I'm also going to show you that I have conditional properties set up for conditional text. So what I'm basically saying is if column value A is greater than column value C, I want you to spit out this particular text. And then I also enabled the analytics, which was a little checkbox. So when a user runs this report, guess what? I magically made the condition happen. And now I have that text that I asked to appear in that little notes box, and it became a hyperlink because I enabled analytics. And it took me to additional detail behind the original report. So I can figure out, whatever the problem is or whatever the condition threshold was, I can see more detail behind the scenes. And what's magic about this is that I did not set up this report. This supporting report was created on the fly using special AI and intelligence built into management reporting. And so it will determine when you check that little analytics box, what is the best supporting report to create? And it creates it on the fly for your user to go look at. So this is pretty powerful stuff, guys. All right. Another new feature is bursting. And this provides, of course, some parity with the FR feature, also called bursting, but there are going to be some differences. So note that you can, within management reports, batch and schedule bursting using the narrative reporting administration utility, which is called the file transfer utility. But you can't necessarily schedule a job directly from the web interface today. That is something that's coming. Oracle has it on the roadmap. I don't know when it will be released, but hopefully very soon. So let's take a look at this demo. So I'm going to go into a bursting area called bursting definitions, which is where I have to go and set up my definition for the burst. I get to select what type of object I want to apply that to. So I'm going to select a report, which was the same report I just used called conditional text. And now I'm selecting the dimension that I want to burst along, which in this case is my entity's dimension. And notice that I used a relationship function for that. So I don't have to necessarily type in all the numbers. And then what I'm setting up now is what is going to happen to this burst? Like, is it going to go somewhere? And how does that person get notified? So in this case, I'm setting up an email distribution to myself, and I am going to attach the bursted reports. And here is me setting up dynamic names for each one of those report objects. Each one is going to be called the name of the report, dash, and then whatever the entity was that I bursted across. Now I'm also setting up the subject line of that email, so it's pretty clear what this is, as well as the email message. And then what will happen is those reports will show up as attachments. You can also send it to the library, by the way, and have your users just navigate to the library and run them live. So now I'm going to save this bursting definition. And then you also execute the burst from the same exact place. And here is what that final resultant email looks like. It let me know as the administrator that the bursting operation completed successfully. And then as the user, they will see something like this, which in this case, because I set it up with email, every single report that got bursted, in this case, it was 5 total entity members, got sent in my email. And here's what it looks like with all of my conditional text that I just enabled in the past demo. So it's pretty cool. It's very much in line at a high level with what existed before in FR. But again, it's a little bit different. So as long as you understand the differences. And then the other note that I would say here is if you are migrating from FR to MR, what is important to know about bursting is those bursts will not come over. You will have to recreate those in management reporting because it's built against a very different platform. So another exciting enhancement is the ability to now use EPM Automate with narrative reporting. Prior to this update, there was only one administration utility, which was the aforementioned file transfer utility. And that could be used to batch and automate components of this reporting suite. However, that was very different from the other EPM cloud tools. The rest of the tools use a product called EPM Automate, so it was very inconsistent. So in Oracle's quest to provide consistency across the entire platform, they are now extending more administrative functionality to narrative reporting through EPM Automate. And this is a list of all of the supported functions today in EPM Automate for narrative reporting. You should note, though, that there is not full parity between EPM Automate and the file transfer utility today. So you might want to use EPM Automate for some tasks and use the file transfer utility for the tasks that are required to be used by it. But this is a good start, and I do expect to see enhancements and more functionality and eventually full parity within EPM Automate in the future. Another enhancement is the continued quest to integrate the reports technology solution into Excel/SmartView. But I thought here that I would take a moment to discuss all the ways in which reports allows for integration with both Excel and SmartView, not just the new features, but also what was there before so you get a full picture. It has existed in pieces up until now, and then with the September 2020 release, they basically finished it out. So this slide covers one of 3 ways that the report solution can integrate with Excel/SmartView. And this is a parity gap filler, by the way, for FR, because FR had this functionality as does today. So the way this works is that users can run a report in the web, and then they can export it directly to Excel through the web interface. And it will export with all formatting, and this is for display purposes only, meaning that you can't necessarily take that export and use it in SmartView. There's a whole different option for that, which I will cover in a second. So to be clear, this export from the web interface will not include a connection back to the data source, and you cannot take this and use it in SmartView. It is just for really archival purposes and display purposes only. Now, any user can run this feature from the web, assuming that they have access to the report and the data underlying it. And they're going to use the actions menu on the report, as you can see right here. And the result is an exported Excel workbook with the same name as the report if they don't change the default name. And as mentioned, this is recommended for users who want an Excel dump of an existing report for maybe archival or display reasons. And this is the first way that reports integrates with Excel/SmartView. The next way that reports integrates with Excel/SmartView is a feature that has already been in existence for a while. This is the ability to take a chart or grid object. And what's important about the distinction is we're not talking about the entire report. We're talking about just the chart or grid objects, not the title, not the footer, not the formatting, but just charts and grids. And you can take that object and export it directly to SmartView, and it's ad hoc ready. So that means that the formatting and the calculations will not come over because they would not be supported in ad hoc. So this does require the narrative reporting SmartView extension. So you'd have to make sure that users have that installed, and a user would connect to narrative reporting through SmartView. They would go into the library view, which is what you see here. They would find the MR report that they want to import from. They would expand it. Then they would find a chart or grid object. So in this case, you can see this here. I'm going to use a grid object. And then once they highlight that, they will see this option at the bottom, import as ad hoc query. And then what will happen is there will be an Excel workbook that's spit out that has that particular chart or grid object. And when I say chart, by the way, what we really mean is the grid behind the chart. Obviously, we're not talking about a chart. And it would show up something like this. So you would see, again, there's no formatting. There's actually calculations in this report, which you wouldn't know about because it's not on the screenshot. But there's, I think, like a variance column that's actually a report calculation. But all you would get are the members so that you could use this in an ad hoc query mode. This is recommended for users who want to drill into or troubleshoot a data intersection they saw in a report. So they could import it as an ad hoc ready query in SmartView, and then they could just use it to go immediately into the data, explore it, and slice and dice and drill and figure out whatever the problem is or whatever they need to see more information on. So that's the second way that reports integrates with Excel and SmartView. The third and final way, which is an enhancement, is basically the full-blown thing. So this works very much like the ad hoc ready query, except that it provides options for both a fully formatted report or the ad hoc query ready view. So much like what I just went through, a user would have to go into the narrative reporting SmartView extension. They would connect to narrative reporting. They would go into the library, which you've already seen before. This time they would find a report and not necessarily the charts and grids underneath it, but the report itself and highlight it. And then what you'll see at the bottom is this import formatted report. And then what will happen is you'll see this at the top, which is very much like what you see in export to Excel from the web interface. It is the fully formatted report. It is not SmartView query ready though. It's just display only. So no necessarily, I'm sorry, it's fully formatted, but it doesn't necessarily have any ad hoc query ready ability yet, but you can choose to do that. What you see here, which is a little bit hard to see, is when you import using this method versus the web interface export, because you're in the narrative reporting SmartView extension, you get these new little menu icons at the top, which you won't get if you do a web interface export. And these allow you to do things like change your point of view, change the prompt member selections that you made when you first downloaded this. And the important one is the Analyze button, which will allow you to now turn this fully formatted report into an ad hoc query ready grid, which is now this one below. So this is basically a two-step process here, what's happening. I go into SmartView, I connect to a report, I import the formatted report, it shows up like this. I'm like, wait a second, I really want to go look into this particular intersection. So now I click the Analyze button and it takes me directly to an ad hoc query ready view, which now I can use directly against SmartView. It keeps all the point of views and prompt member selections and allows me to just go straight into drilling and slicing and dicing. So the obvious thing here is if you're reading between the lines, what this means is, again, this is a two-step process. If you just want the ad hoc query ready mode, don't do this. Instead, do the process I described before on the previous slide, which is to open up your report, pick one of the grids or charts, and then do the import as ad hoc query instead. And then the final notable update that I'd like to cover today is the addition of user variable support in reports. So note that this functionality, as I mentioned before, did not exist in FR. So this is brand new functionality for static reporting. And the way that you get to these user variables is when you go into the grid report development. So again, we're talking about management reporting. You select from the dropdown at the bottom, and you're going to select a little bit unintuitive, but you're going to select substitution variables. And what you're going to see is actually a mixed set of substitution variables and user variables. And you won't really know what the difference is. You would just have to know what the variables are. But it does show you, as it did for substitution variables. So here's a substitution variable. This is for planning module, so it's whatever came out of the box. But it does show you what the current value of it is. And so this one is a user variable, and it's showing me what the current value is. So it's a really cool feature. I really love this feature. I wish it was something they had put in years ago into FR, because there's a number of use cases where the user variable would be preferable over a substitution variable. So I think it's super cool and reflective of the fact that this narrative reporting suite is now on a future looking platform, so they can do stuff like this. All right, so that's it for our webcast today. So thank you for joining. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the box. And as I'm waiting for those, here are our upcoming webcasts so you can plan ahead. We have an exciting series coming up next, which discusses designing for the modern day space. That's a 2-part series that starts next week. And then, as I'm sure many of you have already heard about, the week of October 19th, we have the first ever Hyperion Solutions Conference since 2007. And you can join over 700 registrants as we bring back the band and revisit some original presentations from 13 years ago, mixed with modern day on-prem and cloud technology best practices. And Oracle even has their own track of sessions. So it's a surefire way to increase your technical knowledge at a completely free and virtual gathering. So sign up today. All right, so let's see what questions we have. It looks like we have quite a few. Okay, the question is, we are on FR with PBCS. When do we have to make the switch, and is a separate license required? So one of the things that I did not talk about, because it's not one of the notable updates, but let me just segue for a second here, which is that what is going to happen very soon is if you're on legacy licensing, or even if you're on new licensing, Oracle is going to make a light version of management reports available in application pods. So if you are on legacy PBCS, FCCS, EPBCS, what will happen is Oracle is going to put in what I think they're now calling distributed reporting as a second option within the reporting area. And you can create either management reports, or you can keep using financial reports. And they're going to have both available to customers, so you can start making the switch. Now, the other important thing that I need to tell you here is so that this is not separate licensing. It's just going to come into your pods, but this is a light version of management reporting. It is not the same fully robust management reporting like I'm talking about in the narrative reporting suite of tools. So one of the things that people may not understand about FR is FR in the EPM cloud world is different than what existed in on-prem, and that FR can only attach to the environment that it's installed in. So for instance, in this example, we're talking about PBCS. Let's say it's PBCS test. So FR can only attach to the cubes that are in PBCS test. It cannot reach across to prod. It cannot reach across to other EPM cloud applications like other planning or FCC or tax reporting or other applications. So MR is going to have the same limitation once it goes into the pods. So it's not the fully robust feature that comes with narrative reporting, which allows you to pull across any pod in EPM cloud and even Essbase and mix and match all that data. Okay, next question, same question, but basically the timing of when is that light version of management reporting going to be available in PBCS? So I will tell you, obviously I'm not Oracle, right? So I can only give you based on what Oracle has told us, which is that they are expecting that to happen by the end of this calendar year, which will be great, right? Because then people can start playing around with this light version of management reporting. They can start migrating over their FR reports into the new technology, because there is nearly full parity now between the two technologies. There are some differences though, but at least it gives you a head start so you can start migrating your users to this new technology. And what I will say is I've taught a lot of narrative reporting classes, and we get a number of FR developers in these classes, and they love working with management reporting. I've heard 100% across the board that it is easier to use. It's a much better technology. Again, though, it doesn't have necessarily full parity. So if you're using some niche feature in FR, that's important to note before you make this move. But it is a much better technology for reporting. Okay, let's see. How many customers in the US use XBRL with narrative reporting? Oracle mentions they don't have any customers in the US that use XBRL, so just need clarification. So I'm going to be perfectly honest here. That's not actually a reporting tool within narrative reporting that I use a lot. I have heard that there is some XBRL support outside of the United States, but I honestly am not the right person to give you those numbers. I would reach out to your Oracle sales rep. I don't want to mislead you. Okay, let's see. If we're trying to build out a flux analysis reporting package that embeds a management report with a comments column, how can we add comments to the package into the embedded reporting without actually going into design mode and modifying the comments on the report itself? So that is a very good question. Let me just make sure I understand the details of this. Okay, so one of the things I did not talk about because it's not a new feature for 2020 is the notes feature. And that is a feature on the management reporting side. And what that allows you to do is have users add commentary to a report and not necessarily a report package. So we're talking about management reporting. There are going to be some limitations here, though. So you could have users kind of enter their commentary on the management reporting side, and then you can pull that into a report package, but only if you're in PDF mode. So there's some limitations here. I'm not sure that that's exactly the answer you're looking for. I have had customers ask this question before, by the way, and they've talked to Oracle about, how can we accomplish this functionality given what we have today. I think that there is some room for improvement, and I don't think what I just described is probably the best situation for you, but it's a start. And the other thing that I would recommend is maybe go into Cloud Customer Connect. They have an Idea Lab, which is where enhancements are now getting logged. I would describe your particular situation so that Oracle can work with you. And they're really good, by the way. The narrative reporting team is really good about reaching out to customers to trying to understand, what their use cases are and to see if they can build and enhance functionality for these particular use cases. But yeah, unfortunately, again, that's one idea, may not be the best idea. The other thing I can think of is if you're talking about a report package, you might want to do something like put comments into Excel and give users access to the Excel workbook, which then can be embedded content into your Word doclet or your PowerPoint doclet. So that might be another idea. But again, that's not really getting to the heart of what you're trying to do. It's just some options given what we have today. Let's see. Okay, and then there was a comment on that. Okay, are there any other questions? I'm going to leave it open for about 30. Oh, here we go. Can I build a variable that is coming off another management report? Let me think about that. I'm going to say the answer is no, not in today's version. So because the way that would work is essentially the variables that exist in management reporting come from your data source, right? So it's either going to be a user variable or substitution variable. And right now, I do not know of a way within a report package to reference those data source variables. But what you could do, let me think about this. You could use Smart View, create a grid that maybe has, like a cell reference to a management sheet that references that substitution variable. And remember that this is Smart View, so we're talking about substitution variables and not user variables. You could create maybe like a management sheet that has the hard-coded substitution variable name in it, and then it gets retrieved into a Smart View grid, which then you can use to set a variable and report packages. So that might be a way to get around it. I have not tried it, but I know I've been asked this question before, and I think I gave the same theory. Okay, and so you said that's exactly what I did. I use Smart View to pull, yeah. But I don't think there's another way to do that right now. Unfortunately, there's no direct method that I'm aware of and how to handle that. But definitely something that you should put into the Idea Lab. I would recommend that because it sounds like it could be some really cool functionality that they could add into the product. Okay, I'm going to leave it open and see if there are any other questions. Can I tag specific users when commenting? It seems like the comments are generic on the report itself. So no, unfortunately you can't. And this is going to be a difference between management reporting notes and FR annotations. So for those of you coming from the FR world, if you've ever used annotations, it's essentially like commenting directly onto the report interface, just like I said with notes. But with FR annotations, they had the ability to actually tag which user made that comment, and even I think the time and date when that comment was made. In the current version of Notes, which I would say is still a 1.0 release, I know that Oracle has been asking a lot of questions to customers about what types of enhancements they would like to make to it. And right now, as you mentioned, there is no way to necessarily tag a specific user. They'd have to actually write that out themselves in their text. It also doesn't necessarily allow you to list the date and time that the comment was made. So those are some limitations today, but I know that Oracle is asking questions about what enhancements are customers looking for? And like one of the things that I know that they've been talking about is doing inline commentary with the notes feature on management reporting. So if I have a grid, I don't want this like random sticky note box, to be where people comment. I actually want to comment on every line of the grid. So I know that's something that they're looking into. So again, use the Idea Lab on Cloud Customer Connect to see if they're open to this idea. What other questions can I answer for you? Okay, I'm gonna leave this open for another 30 seconds or so. Nice little comment. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Oh, here we go. A couple more. Can we copy a grid from one report to another report in MR? I believe the answer is no. I believe within one report, you can copy a grid and duplicate it essentially on the same report, but I don't think the feature is there yet to copy one report to another report. I think that's something that is on the roadmap. You'll have to double check my memory here because I just don't think that's possible yet, but I believe that Oracle has mentioned that they plan to add that functionality in the future. Is there a way to embed a text section on a report to a reporting package? So the only way that you can really do it that I know of is by using the notes feature and then using a PDF report package to bring in those notes. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can think of here. The other way, same concept, but except that it's a text box. If you use a text box, for instance, that had static commentary on it, I think it would still be a PDF report package, so you're still limited. If you're using a PowerPoint or a Word based report package, I don't think there's an easy way to bring that in, at least not today. That's one of those situations where you might want to open up an Excel workbook instead, have the users enter their variance commentary there, and then embed that into your doclets. These are good questions. Very technical for those of you who are not used to report packages, but these are really good questions. All right, I'm going to leave it open for another 10 seconds or so. And like I said, if you have any questions after this webcast, you're welcome to email us at info@nrl.com, and they'd be happy to route the question to the appropriate expert here.